She threw away my medicine, right into the trash like it was nothing more than yesterday's leftovers. My voice shook as I spoke the words into the phone. My own daughter-in-law, Margaret, the pills I need to stay alive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There was silence on the other end of the line. Frank, my oldest friend of 40 years, seemed to be processing what I'd just told him. I could almost see him, sitting in his worn leather armchair, phone pressed to his ear, bushy eyebrows drawing together in that concerned way of his. "Thomas," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm, "are you absolutely certain? Maybe they just got misplaced during the cleaning." I closed my eyes, feeling the ache of betrayal fresh in my chest. At 74, I'd experienced my share of disappointments, but nothing prepared me for the calculated cruelty from someone who was supposed to be family. I saw her do it, Frank, with my own eyes. The memory flashed vivid and sharp. Margaret's manicured fingers plucking the orange prescription bottles from my bedside table. The casual flick of her wrist as she dropped them into the kitchen garbage. The slight smile that played at the corner of her lips when she thought I wasn't looking. She didn't even try to hide it, just waited until Michael had left for his golf game. But why would she do such a thing? Frank's voice was tinged with disbelief, the same disbelief I'd been wrestling with for days. I shifted in my chair, feeling the weights of my years and the heaviness of realization. Because she thinks I'm in the way. Because the house is in my name and she wants Michael to have it now. Because she's decided I've lived long enough. The hard truth of it stung my eyes. I'd moved in with my son Michael and his wife Margaret 6 months ago after my fall. The hip surgery had gone well, but at my age, recovery was slow. What was meant to be temporary had stretched longer than any of us anticipated. I hadn't missed the growing tension in Margaret's shoulders each morning, or the way her smile never reached her eyes when she asked if I needed anything. But throwing away prescription medication, my heart pills, my blood pressure medication, the painkillers that made movement possible, that crossed a line I hadn't imagined existed. "You need to tell Michael," Frank urged, "immediately." I tried. The defeat in my voice surprised even me. He didn't believe me. Said I must have misunderstood or forgotten taking them myself. Said Margaret has been nothing but helpful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Frank's sharp intake of breath carried through the phone. "And the prescriptions? Can you get them refilled?" "Not for another week. Insurance won't cover early refills, and on my fixed income," I let the sentence trail off. We both knew what that meant. "I'm coming over," Frank declared, and I heard shuffling on his end of the line. "And I'm bringing my extra blood pressure pills. They're the same dosage as yours." "Frank, you don't have to—" "Don't you dare tell me what I don't have to do, Thomas Miller. I've known you since our Army days, and I'm not about to let some entitled daughter-in-law put you at risk." Tears pricked my eyes at the fierceness in his voice. In a world that increasingly made me feel invisible, Frank saw me clearly. "Thank you," I whispered. After we hung up, I sat still in the guest bedroom that had become my temporary home. The walls were a bland beige that Margaret had insisted was calming. A few of my personal items dotted the dresser. A photo of my late wife Eleanor, my favorite watch, the wooden model ship my grandson had given me for Christmas. Everything else remained packed in boxes in the garage until I was more settled. The house was quiet. Michael was still at his golf game, and Margaret had gone shopping with her sister. I'd been left alone, as I often was these days. Perhaps they hoped I'd simply fade away, a ghost in their home before I became one in reality. With effort, I pushed myself up from the chair and made my way slowly to the kitchen. My hip protested with each step, but determination pushed me forward. I needed evidence. I needed Michael to believe me. The kitchen gleamed with the cold perfection Margaret prized. Stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, not a speck of food or sign of actual cooking visible. I approached the trash can beneath the sink, a sleek, automatic thing that opened with the wave of a hand. My medications wouldn't be there, of course. The trash had been taken out days ago. But perhaps I could find something else, something to prove to Michael that his wife wasn't the saint he believed her to be. As I searched through drawers and cabinets, my fingers trembling slightly, the front door opened. I froze, listening to the click of heels on hardwood. "Thomas? What are you doing?" Margaret's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a surgeon's blade. I turned slowly, steadying myself against the counter. "Looking for my tea." The lie came easily, surprising me. Margaret stood in the kitchen entrance, shopping bags dangling from her arms, her expression a mixture of suspicion and disdain. At 43, she was attractive in that polished way that seemed to require tremendous effort. Highlighted hair perfectly styled, makeup precise, clothing that screamed of careful selection and significant expense. "Your tea is in the pantry, where it always is." Her words were clipped. She set her bags on the island counter and studied me. "Are you confused again?" The subtle implication wasn't lost on me. She'd been planting seeds of doubt about my mental acuity for weeks now. Little comments to Michael about how I'd forgotten conversations or misplaced items. "Not confused, Margaret, just tired." I straightened as much as my aching body would allow. "It takes a lot of energy to recover from having your medications thrown away." Her eyes widened slightly, the only indication that my direct confrontation had caught her off guard. Then her expression smoothed out, replaced with a look of practiced concern. "Michael mentioned you were having some delusions about your medications. I'm worried about you, Thomas. Perhaps we need to talk to your doctor about these paranoid thoughts." The calm cruelty of it took my breath away. This was her strategy. Not to deny it, but to pathologize my accurate perceptions, to make me doubt myself, to ensure Michael would never believe me. "I saw you throw them away, Margaret." I kept my voice steady, my military training from decades ago serving me well. "Tuesday morning at 9:17, you were wearing your blue blouse with the gold buttons. You took all 4 prescription bottles from my nightstand while I was in the bathroom. I watched you from the hallway." Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps surprised that my recall was so specific. Then her mask slipped back into place. "You know, confusion and fabricating detailed false memories can be signs of dementia. I've been reading about it. We should really have you evaluated more thoroughly." Before I could respond, the front door opened again, and Michael's voice called out, "I'm home! Anyone want to hear about my miraculous recovery on the back 9? Margaret's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice warming as she called back, "In the kitchen, darling. Your father and I were just chatting." I watched the transformation with a kind of horrified fascination. The woman was an accomplished actress, capable of switching masks in an instant. Michael appeared in the doorway, still in his golf attire, his face flushed from sun and exertion. At 50, he was the image of me in my younger years, tall, with the same gray eyes and cleft chin. My heart ached at the sight of him, my only child, now caught between his father and the woman he'd married. "Hey, you two, getting along?" His tone was light, but I caught the undercurrent of hope and worry. "Wonderfully," Margaret answered, moving to kiss his cheek. "I was just telling Thomas we should schedule another checkup with Dr. Morris. I'm concerned about some memory issues." Michael's expression clouded with concern as he looked at me. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" The trap was perfectly laid. If I accused Margaret now, I'd only reinforce her narrative about my deteriorating mental state. If I stayed silent, I'd be complicit in my own gaslighting. I chose a third option. "Actually, I've been thinking it's time for me to go back home. My hip is much better, and I miss my independence." Michael frowned. "But the doctor said at least 3 more months of recovery, and your house has all those stairs." "I've made arrangements," I lied, praying my face wouldn't give me away. "Frank's gonna help. We've worked it all out." Margaret's mask slipped just slightly, revealing a flash of triumphant satisfaction. She thought she was winning, pushing me out sooner than planned. If only she knew what I had already set in motion. The doorbell rang, interrupting the tense moment. Michael looked puzzled. "Are we expecting someone?" "That would be Frank," I said, relief flooding through me at the perfect timing. "He's bringing something for me." Michael went to answer the door. I heard Frank's familiar voice in the hallway, followed by the appearance of my oldest friend. He looked magnificent in his righteous anger, all 5 feet 10 inches of him practically vibrating with protective energy, despite his 76 years and the cane he now relied on. "Thomas, I came as quickly as I could." He embraced me, discreetly pressing a small bottle into my hand as he did so. Then he turned to Margaret, his smile tight and eyes sharp. "Margaret, lovely to see you. I've brought Thomas some supplies for his return home." Margaret's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Return home? But he's not cleared for—" "I've already spoken with Dr. Morris," Frank interrupted smoothly. The lie rolled off his tongue with impressive conviction. "As a retired paramedic, I'm fully qualified to oversee Thomas's care. The doctor agreed it might be best for his recovery to be in familiar surroundings." I suppressed a smile at Frank's perfect improvisation. In our Army days, he'd always been the one to stand up to difficult officers and impossible situations. Decades later, he hadn't lost his touch. Michael looked confused, caught between the conflicting narratives. "Dad, is this what you really want? To go back to your house so soon?" The concern in his eyes nearly broke my resolve. Michael was a good son who truly wanted what was best for me. He wasn't to blame for his blindness when it came to Margaret. Love could be the most effective blinder. "It is," I said firmly. "I appreciate everything you and Margaret have done, but it's time." Margaret's relief was almost palpable, though she made a good show of reluctance. "If you're sure, Thomas, we just want what's best for you." Frank snorted softly beside me, earning a sharp glance from Margaret. "Michael, would you mind helping me gather Thomas's things?" Frank asked. "I have my car outside, and I can take him today if that works for everyone." "Today?" Michael looked startled. "That's awfully sudden." "Best not to delay," Frank said cheerfully. "Thomas and I have already set everything up at his place." As Michael hesitantly agreed and led Frank to the guest room to pack my belongings, I found myself alone with Margaret again. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken truths. "You won't win, you know," Margaret finally said, her voice low and controlled. "Even if you leave now, Michael will still listen to me, and when your health declines further, which it will, who do you think will be making decisions about your care, about your house, about everything you own?" I met her gaze steadily. "You're assuming a lot, Margaret." "I'm not assuming anything. I know exactly how this plays out. I've seen it before." A small, cruel smile touched her lips. "My mother went through the same thing with my grandfather. The stubborn old man thought he could maintain his independence too. You know where he ended up. In a state facility, with nothing to his name, all because he couldn't accept help when it was offered." The cold calculation behind her words chilled me. This wasn't about my well-being. This had never been about helping me recover. This was about my assets, my house, my savings, modest though they were. "Thank you for clarifying your intentions," I said quietly. "It's always helpful to know exactly where one stands." Something in my calm response unsettled her. Perhaps she'd expected fear or anger. Instead, she got the serene confidence of a man who had already made his countermove. Before she could respond, Michael and Frank returned, my suitcase in Michael's hand and a box of personal items in Frank's arms. "Got everything," Frank announced brightly. "Michael was a wonderful help." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Michael helped load my belongings into Frank's car, fretting about the suddenness of it all.
Margaret maintained her facade of concerned reluctance, even hugging me goodbye with whispered wishes for my recovery. As I settled into Frank's passenger seat and we pulled away from the house I had spent the last 6 months in, relief washed over me.
"Did you get what you needed?" Frank asked, once we were safely out of sight. I patted my pocket, where I'd placed the small recording device I'd ordered online last week, the one I'd activated right before confronting Margaret in the kitchen. "Yes," I said, "I got exactly what I needed." Frank's face broke into a knowing smile. "Good. Now, you're staying with me until we get this sorted. I've already made up the guest room." "What would I do without you, Frank?" "Let's be thankful you'll never have to find out." He reached over to pat my hand. "Now, I've already called Samuel Winters." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "The attorney? You didn't waste any time. When someone tries to harm my best friend by throwing away life-saving medication? No, I don't waste time." Frank's voice was steel beneath silk. "Sam's expecting us tomorrow morning at 9. I think it's time to update your will, don't you?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and determination. "Yes, and to make some other arrangements as well." As Frank drove toward his small ranch house, I gazed out the window at the autumn leaves beginning to turn. At 74, I had hoped for peace in my later years. Instead, I found myself in a battle I never expected to fight. But if Margaret thought I would be an easy victim, a confused old man to be manipulated and discarded, she was about to learn how very wrong she was. The game she had started was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. Frank's house was a welcome respite from the tension I'd been living with for months. Unlike Margaret's pristine, magazine-worthy home, Frank's place had the comfortable disarray of a life well lived. Books stacked on end tables, photographs covering nearly every vertical surface, and furniture that invited you to sit rather than just admire. "Make yourself at home," Frank said, carrying my suitcase to the guest room. "I mean that literally. This is your home for as long as you need it." I eased myself into his worn leather recliner, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. My hip ached from the stress and movement, but the relief of escape overshadowed the pain. "I still can't believe she would do something like that," I said, almost to myself. "Throwing away medication that keeps me alive." Frank returned, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He passed one to me before settling into the adjacent chair. "I can," he said grimly. "I've seen it before. Not often, thank God, but enough to recognize the pattern. People who view the elderly as inconveniences, obstacles to inheritance, burdens to be managed or removed." I sipped the whiskey, letting the warmth spread through my chest. "I never thought it would happen to me. Not from my son's wife." "That's the tragedy of it," Frank sighed. "It's almost always family. Strangers don't have the same access or motivation." We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the weight of this truth settling between us. "You've got the recording?" Frank finally asked. I patted my pocket again, feeling the small device through the fabric. "Everything. Her admission that she knows exactly what she's doing, the comparison to her grandfather, her threat about what will happen when my health declines further." "Good. Samuel will want to hear it." Frank took another sip of his whiskey. "I've known Sam for 20 years. Best elder law attorney in the county. He doesn't tolerate elder abuse in any form." "Is that what this is?" I asked quietly. "Elder abuse? What would you call deliberately disposing of life-saving medication and then gaslighting you about it?" Frank's voice was gentle but firm. "Yes, Thomas, that's exactly what this is." The term landed heavily. In my 74 years, I'd never imagined myself as a victim. Not after surviving combat in Vietnam, not after enduring the loss of my beloved Eleanor to cancer 5 years ago, not after rebuilding my life as a widower. But here I was, pushed out of my son's home, manipulated by a daughter-in-law who saw me only as an obstacle to her ambitions. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Now, we protect you. Your assets, your autonomy,
your dignity." Frank leaned forward, his expression intent. "And we make damn sure Margaret never gets control of anything that belongs to you." "Michael will be hurt," I said, the realization aching in my chest. "No matter what we do, this will hurt him." Frank's expression softened. "Yes, it will. But, Thomas, he's already being hurt. He just doesn't know it yet. A woman who would do this to her father-in-law? What else is she capable of? What else has she done that you don't know about?" I hadn't considered that possibility. The thought sent a chill through me that the whiskey couldn't warm. "Get some rest," Frank advised, standing with a slight groan. "Tomorrow, we start building your fortress." The guest room was simply furnished but comfortable. I placed the small bottle of blood pressure medication Frank had given me on the nightstand, a stark reminder of why I was here. As I prepared for bed, moving carefully to accommodate my still healing hip, I found myself thinking about Michael. My son had always been a good boy, sensitive, earnest, eager to please. Even as a child, he'd hated conflict, often stepping in as peacemaker between neighborhood children. It was one of the qualities I most admired in him. But now I wondered if that same aversion to conflict had blinded him to his wife's true nature. How had Margaret convinced him that I was confused rather than being truthfully concerned? How had she woven her narrative so effectively that my own son doubted me? Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by memories and worries. Morning arrived with pale sunshine and the smell of coffee brewing. I found Frank in the kitchen, already dressed and working on a crossword puzzle. "Sleep okay?" he asked, not looking up from his newspaper. "Well enough," I replied, accepting the mug of coffee he pushed across the cable. "Sam's office is about 20 minutes from here. We'll leave in an hour." Frank filled in another word on his puzzle. "Bring the recording." I nodded, sipping the strong black coffee. What exactly can an attorney do in this situation? It's not as if Margaret committed a crime that can be prosecuted. Frank finally looked up, his eyebrows raised. Tampering with medication isn't a crime? I beg to differ. But even setting that aside, Sam can help you create legal protections that Margaret can't circumvent. Such as a new will, for starters. One that makes your intentions crystal clear and can't be challenged on grounds of mental incompetence. A healthcare proxy that designates someone you trust. Not Michael, unfortunately, given the circumstances. Possibly a trust to protect your assets. I digested this information slowly. Will all of this be expensive? Frank waved a dismissive hand. Sam and I go way back. He'll take care of you. Besides, would you rather pay legal fees now or let Margaret have everything later? Put that way, the answer was obvious. Samuel Winter's office was located in a converted Victorian house on the edge of downtown. The interior had been modernized while preserving the original woodwork and architectural details. It felt both professional and welcoming. The attorney himself was younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He rose from behind his desk as his assistant ushered us in. "Frank, good to see you," he said warmly, shaking my friend's hand before turning to me. "And you must be Thomas. Please, have a seat." I settled into one of the comfortable chairs facing his desk, Frank taking the other. Samuel returned to his seat, folding his hands on the polished surface. "Frank's given me the broad strokes of your situation," he said, his expression serious. "But I'd like to hear it from you, if you don't mind." For the next 30 minutes, I recounted everything. My fall, the surgery, moving in with Michael and Margaret, the increasingly tense atmosphere, and finally, the incident with my medication. When I mentioned the recording, Samuel's eyebrows rose. "You have a recording of her admitting to this?" Not to throwing away the medication specifically, I clarified, but to her intentions regarding my assets, to her seeing me as an obstacle to her plans for when my health deteriorates. That's extremely valuable, Samuel said, nodding thoughtfully. May I hear it? I removed the small device from my pocket and placed it on his desk. With a few clicks, Margaret's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. You won't win, you know. Even if you leave now, Michael will still listen to me. And when your health declines further, which it will, who do you think will be making decisions about your care, about your house, about everything you own? My own voice, steadier than I remembered feeling. You're assuming a lot, Margaret. Her response, dripping with cruelty. I'm not assuming anything. I know exactly how this plays out. I've seen it before. My mother went through the same thing with my grandfather. The stubborn old man thought he could maintain his independence too. You know where he ended up? In a state facility with nothing to his name.
I nodded slowly. I hate keeping secrets from him. This isn't a secret, Thomas. It's a boundary. There's a difference. Frank's expression was kind but firm. You're protecting yourself from exploitation. Michael may not understand that now, but someday he might. I hope so, I murmured. I really hope so. The rest of the day passed quietly. Frank helped me settle into his guest room more permanently, clearing space in the closet and dresser for my belongings. I called my regular pharmacy to update my address and arranged for my remaining prescriptions to be transferred to one near Frank's house. Around dinner time, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Frank, who was preparing a simple pasta dish in the kitchen, caught my eye. You don't have to answer, he said. Not until you're ready. I considered this for a moment, then shook my head. No, I need to talk to him. He's still my son. I answered the call, trying to keep my voice neutral. Hello, Michael. Dad, he said, sounding relieved. I was worried when you didn't pick up earlier. Had he called before? I checked my phone and saw 2 missed calls from earlier in the day, when we'd been in Samuel's office. Sorry about that. I was busy getting settled at Frank's. How are you doing? Michael asked, genuine concern in his voice. Your hip okay with the move? It's fine, I assured him. Frank's taking good care of me. There was a brief pause before Michael continued, his voice hesitant. Dad, I just want to make sure you're really okay with this. It all happened so quickly. If you want to come back home, you know there's always a place for you here. The sincerity in his voice nearly broke my resolve. This was my boy, the child I'd raised, the man I was so proud of. But then I remembered Margaret's cold voice on the recording, her calculated cruelty, and I strengthened my determination. I'm good here, son. Really. I think it's best for everyone this way. Another pause. Margaret feels terrible, you know. She thinks you left because you were angry with her. I had to bite back a bitter laugh. That's not why I left. Then why did you? What happened? Michael sounded genuinely perplexed, and my heart ached for him. He truly had no idea what his wife was capable of. Michael, we can talk about this later when things have settled. For now, just know that I'm safe and comfortable with Frank. Dad, please, if something's wrong, I want to help fix it. The earnestness in his voice was almost my undoing. I closed my eyes, fighting the impulse to tell him everything. But Frank was right. Now wasn't the time. Not until the legal protections were in place. Nothing's wrong that can't be fixed with a little time, I said carefully. Let's talk next week, okay? In person, maybe. Just you and me. Michael sighed, clearly not satisfied, but willing to accept the compromise. Okay, Dad. Next week. Take care of yourself, all right? I love you. I love you too, son. Always will. After hanging up, I sat staring at the phone for a long moment. Frank approached, setting a glass of water beside me on the table. You okay? He asked quietly. No, but I will be. That night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed in Frank's guest room, I found myself thinking about the strange turns life takes.
At 74, I had imagined my final years would be peaceful. Grandchildren visiting, quiet days in my garden, maybe some travel if my health permitted. Instead, I was essentially in hiding from my daughter-in-law, rebuilding legal fortifications around my life and assets. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel defeated. If anything, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Margaret had underestimated me, assumed that age had made me malleable and vulnerable. She had no idea of the strength the decades of life had built in me. She had no concept of what I had already survived. Tomorrow, I would continue working with Samuel to secure my future. I would begin physical therapy to strengthen my healing hip. I would start making arrangements to return to my own home, this time with proper support systems in place. Margaret thought she had won when I left Michael's house. Little did she know, her actions had only awakened the warrior in me, the part that had survived war, grief, and countless other challenges. She had thrown away my medicine, thinking it would weaken me. Instead, it had made me stronger than ever.
I spoke with Samuel twice more, reviewing drafts of the new will and healthcare directives. I even managed to have a brief civil phone conversation with Michael, carefully steering around the subject of Margaret. On Friday morning, Frank and I returned to Samuel's office to sign the finalized documents. The attorney walked me through each one, ensuring I understood every clause, every protection being put in place. This revocable living trust, Samuel explained, indicating the thickest document, gives you complete control of your assets during your lifetime, but protects them from exploitation. You're the trustee, with Frank as successor trustee if you become incapacitated. I nodded, signing where indicated. My signature was steadier than it had been in months. The new will is straightforward, Samuel continued. Michael remains your primary heir, but his inheritance will be managed by the trust rather than passed directly to him. This prevents Margaret from gaining control while still ensuring Michael benefits as you intended. The healthcare directive and power of attorney were next, officially designating Frank as my healthcare proxy and giving him authority to make financial decisions if I became unable to do so. With each signature, I felt a growing sense of security, like walls being rebuilt around a fortress that had been breached. "One final document," Samuel said, sliding a paper across his desk. "This is a letter I've prepared detailing the circumstances that led to these changes. It explains the incident with your medication and includes a transcript of the recording. It's not part of the legal documentation, but I recommend keeping it with your papers. If Margaret ever challenges these arrangements, this letter provides important context." I read through the letter slowly, seeing everything laid out so clearly. Margaret's actions, her words, her intentions brought a rush of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. But underlying them all was a surprising sense of validation. This wasn't in my head. I wasn't confused or misremembering. My perceptions were accurate and my response was justified. "Thank you, Samuel," I said sincerely, signing the letter, "for everything. It's been my privilege, Thomas. I've seen too many cases like yours where the elder didn't have the resources or support to protect themselves. You're doing the right thing." As we left Samuel's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The folder of legal documents under my arm represented more than just papers and signatures. It was tangible proof of my autonomy, my right to protection, my refusal to be erased or exploited. "How does it feel?" Frank asked as we walked to the car. "Like I've taken back control," I said. "Like I matter again." Frank nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. You do matter, Thomas. You always have." That afternoon, I called Michael as promised, suggesting we meet for lunch the following day, just the two of us, as I had proposed. He agreed readily, sounding relieved to have the opportunity to talk. "I'll pick you up at noon. There's that diner you like on Maple Street." "Perfect," I agreed, not mentioning that I'd prefer to meet him there rather than have him pick me up. Better not to reveal Frank's address just yet, I thought, not until I'd had a chance to explain things to Michael.
After hanging up, I discussed the meeting with Frank. "Are you planning to tell him everything?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to lay it all out, the medication, the recording, everything, but another part worries about what that would do to him, to his marriage." Frank considered this carefully. "Whatever you decide, remember that your safety comes first. Michael is a grown man who chose his wife. You didn't choose this situation." I nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. "I'll feel it out, see where the conversation goes." "Just promise me you'll be careful," Frank insisted, "and take your phone. Call me if anything feels off." I promised, touched by his concern. Decades of friendship had forged a bond between us that was proving stronger than blood in this crisis. That night, I slept more soundly than I had since before my fall. The next morning, I awoke feeling refreshed and clear-headed. I dressed with care, selecting a crisp button-down shirt and my best slacks. Frank watched my preparations with an amused smile. "It's not a court appearance, you know. When you reach my age, every outing is an occasion," I replied, adjusting my collar. "And I want Michael to see that I'm doing well, that I'm still myself." Frank's expression sobered. "He should know that regardless of how you're dressed." "Should, yes, but sometimes appearances matter."
Frank drove me to the diner, reiterating his offer to wait nearby in case I needed him. I declined, assuring him I'd call if necessary. As I got out of the car, he handed me a small paper bag. "Your medications," he said simply. "Don't forget." I patted my pocket where I'd already placed my pill organizer. "Got 'em right here, but thank you." The diner was busy with the Saturday lunch crowd, but I spotted Michael already seated in a booth near the back. He stood as I approached, his face lighting up in a genuine smile that warmed my heart. "Dad," he said, embracing me carefully, "you look great." "I feel great," I replied truthfully, sliding into the booth across from him. "How's the hip?" "Better every day. The physical therapist says I'm making excellent progress." Michael nodded, relief evident in his expression. "That's wonderful. I was worried the move might have set back your recovery." "On the contrary," I said, opening my menu, though I already knew what I'd order. "Being at Frank's has been good for me. Less stress, more independence." A flicker of hurt crossed Michael's face, quickly replaced by a neutral expression. "I'm glad," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The waitress arrived to take our orders. Club sandwich for me, burger for Michael, just as we'd ordered countless times over the years. Once she'd gone, an awkward silence settled between us. "Dad," Michael finally said, leaning forward, "what's really going on? Why did you leave so suddenly?" I studied my son's face, the face I'd watched grow from an infant's to a man's, the face that held echoes of Eleanor and myself intertwined. His eyes were earnest, his concern genuine. This was the moment I had to decide how much to tell him. "Michael," I began carefully, "I left because I didn't feel safe anymore." His expression registered shock, then confusion. "Not safe? Dad, what are you talking about? Margaret and I were taking care of you." "Margaret was not taking care of me," I said, keeping my voice level. "She was undermining my care." Michael's brow furrowed. "Is this about the medication again, Dad? We've been over this. You must have misplaced them or forgotten taking them." I took a deep breath. "Son, I saw Margaret throw my medications in the trash. With my own eyes." That's just not possible," Michael stammered, his face paling. "Why would she do something like that?" "Because she sees me as an obstacle. Because she wants control of my assets, my house, everything I have. Because she believes I've lived long enough." Michael stared at me, disbelief warring with something else in his expression. Doubt, perhaps, or the first glimmer of recognition. "These are serious accusations, Dad." "I know they are. I wouldn't make them if I weren't certain." Do you have any proof?" he asked, his voice strained. "Anything beyond what you think you saw?" I considered mentioning the recording, but decided against it. The conversation was already fragile, and I wasn't sure Michael was ready to hear his wife's cold calculation captured in her own voice. "I know what I saw, and I know what I experienced in your home these past 6 months. The comments suggesting I was confused or forgetful, the gradual isolation from friends, the control over my medications, my mail, my finances." Michael's face had grown increasingly pale as I spoke. "Dad, that's not... We were trying to help you." "You were," I acknowledged, reaching across the table to place my hand on his. "I know your intentions were good, son, but Margaret's weren't. And I need you to consider, just consider, that I might be telling you the truth." The waitress arrived with our meals, interrupting the moment. We both sat back, silent, until she'd gone again. Michael stared at his plate, no longer appearing hungry. "I don't know what to say," he finally murmured. "I can't believe Margaret would do something like that. She's been nothing but supportive about having you with us. To you, perhaps, but not when we were alone." Michael pushed his plate away slightly, running his hand through his hair in a gesture I recognized from his childhood, a sign of distress, of internal conflict. "I don't know what to think, Dad. This is a lot. I know it is. And I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. Just to keep your eyes open, to consider that there might be things happening that you're not aware of." He nodded slowly, still looking troubled. "Where do we go from here? Are you coming home eventually?"
"No," I said firmly. "I'll be returning to my house once my hip is fully healed. Frank's helping me arrange for some modifications to make it safer. Grab bars in the bathroom, a stair lift, that sort of thing." "I could help with that," Michael offered quickly. "Margaret and I could come over, get everything set up for you." The eagerness in his voice touched me, but I shook my head. "Thank you, but no. I've got it handled." Disappointment flickered across his face. "You don't want our help anymore?" "It's not that," I assured him. "It's about maintaining my independence, making my own decisions. Surely you can understand that." Michael sighed, nodding reluctantly. "I guess so. It's just... I miss you, Dad. The house feels empty without you." The simple admission nearly broke my heart. Despite everything, despite my justified caution and necessary boundaries, he was still my boy, and I missed him too. "We can still see each other," I said, squeezing his hand. "Have lunch like this. Maybe you could come fishing with me and Frank once my hip's a bit stronger." "I'd like that," he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We finished our meal with safer topics: his work at the architectural firm, my progress in physical therapy, memories of fishing trips when he was younger. By the time we'd finished and paid the bill, the tension had eased somewhat, though I could tell Michael was still processing everything I'd told him. Outside the diner, he hugged me again, holding on a bit longer than usual. "I love you, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, son," I replied, patting his back. "Always have, always will." I watched him walk to his car, a heaviness in my chest, despite the necessary conversation we'd had. I hadn't told him everything, the recording, the legal documents, the full extent of Margaret's manipulation, but I'd planted a seed of awareness. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. Frank arrived to pick me up a few minutes later, concern evident in his expression. "How'd it go?" "About as well as could be expected," I said, fastening my seatbelt. He listened. He didn't dismiss everything outright. That's something. "Did you tell him about the recording?" "No," I admitted. "It didn't feel right. Not yet." Frank nodded, understanding in his eyes, one step at a time. The following week brought a flurry of activity. Samuel's office sent final copies of all the signed documents, which I stored securely in Frank's home safe. I continued physical therapy, progressing to using just a cane rather than a walker. Frank and I met with a contractor about modifications to my house and a local home healthcare agency about part-time assistance once I returned home. Through it all, I thought often of Michael. He texted a few times, brief, casual messages asking how I was doing or sharing something from his day.
I responded in kind, maintaining the connection while respecting the boundaries I'd established. He didn't mention our conversation about Margaret, nor did he bring up my returning to their home again. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Thomas? It's Margaret." Her voice was tight, controlled, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. I considered hanging up immediately, but decided against it. "Margaret, what can I do for you?" "Michael told me about your lunch," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. "About your accusations." "They weren't accusations," I corrected calmly. "Just the truth." She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. "The truth. Is that what you call these delusions you've been having?" "They're not delusions, Margaret, and I think you know that. What I know," she said, her voice hardening, "is that you're trying to turn my husband against me with these fabricated stories, and I won't stand for it." I didn't respond immediately, letting her statement hang in the air. Frank, who had been reading nearby, looked up with concern. I shook my head slightly, indicating I had the situation under control. "Is there a purpose to this call, Margaret?" I finally asked. "Yes, actually," she said, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Michael and I have been talking, and we've decided it would be best if you reconsidered returning to your house. Given your health concerns and these mental issues you seem to be experiencing, we think assisted living would be more appropriate." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "I see. And did Michael suggest this, or did you?" "We agreed," she said firmly, "together."
"Well, I appreciate your concern," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, "but my living arrangements have already been decided." "You're not thinking clearly," Margaret insisted. "Michael has power of attorney. He can make these decisions for you if necessary." Now I did laugh, unable to contain it. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Margaret. Michael no longer has power of attorney for my health care or finances." There was a pause. Then, "What are you talking about?" "I've updated my legal documents," I said simply. "Michael is aware that changes were being made, though perhaps not the specifics." Another, longer pause. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its confident edge. "What kind of changes?" "That's between me and my attorney," I replied. "But rest assured, my care and my assets are well protected now." "You can't just—" she began, then stopped herself. "Michael will contest this. Whatever you've done, it won't stand. Not when everyone knows about your confusion, your paranoia." "Everyone?" I echoed. "Or just you, Margaret? Because Dr. Morris found me quite competent at my last evaluation, as did the attorney who helped update my documents, as did the witnesses who signed them." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, recalculating her approach. "This isn't over," she finally said, her voice cold again. "On that we agree," I replied. "Goodbye, Margaret." I ended the call, letting out a long breath as I set down the phone. Frank was watching me, eyebrows raised in question. "Margaret," I explained. "Apparently they've decided I should go into assisted living rather than return home." Frank's expression darkened. "Over my dead body." "Don't worry," I assured him. I made it clear that wasn't happening. I also mentioned that my legal documents have been updated, though not the specifics. How did she take that? "Not well," I admitted, a grim smile playing at my lips. "I believe the phrase, 'this isn't over,' was used." Frank shook his head, concern evident in his eyes. "She won't give up easily, Thomas. People like Margaret rarely do." "I know," I sighed, "but neither will I." The call from Margaret, unsettling as it was, confirmed something I'd suspected. She was growing desperate. My departure from their home, my independence at Frank's, my refusal to fall in line with her plans, all of it threatened the control she thought she had established. I wasn't naive enough to believe she would simply accept defeat. But for the first time since I'd seen her drop my medications into the trash, I felt prepared for whatever came next. I had legal protection, medical support, and friends who believed me. Most importantly, I had my own resolve, strengthened by adversity rather than weakened by it. Margaret thought she was dealing with a confused old man who could be easily manipulated and discarded. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. 2 days after Margaret's call, Michael reached out asking to meet again. His text was brief, almost cryptic. "Dad, need to talk, important. Can we meet at the park by the river, 2 p.m. tomorrow?" The request struck me as unusual. Michael typically preferred restaurants or cafes, not outdoor venues. But I agreed. Frank, ever cautious, insisted on driving me. "I'll stay in the car," he promised when I gave him a look, just close enough to keep an eye on things. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect early autumn afternoon. The park by the river was one of my favorite spots in town. Eleanor and I had often brought Michael there as a child, feeding ducks and playing on the swings. In later years, it had become a place of reflection for me after Eleanor's passing. As Frank pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Michael already seated on a bench overlooking the water. He was alone, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. Even from a distance, the tension in his posture was evident. "I don't like this," Frank muttered. "Something's off." "It's just Michael," I reassured him, though I shared his unease. "I'll be fine. Keep your phone handy." Frank nodded reluctantly. I made my way across the grassy expanse toward my son, my cane sinking slightly into the soft earth with each step. Michael looked up as I approached, his face drawn and pale. He stood, embracing me briefly before we both sat on the bench. "Thanks for coming, Dad," he said, his voice rough as though he hadn't slept. "Of course. What's going on, son? You look terrible." Michael ran his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of distress, and took a deep breath. "I found your medications." The simple statement hung in the air between us. I waited, allowing him to continue at his own pace. "After our lunch, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about Margaret throwing them away." He stared out at the river, not meeting my eyes. I didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, but then I remembered. The garbage hadn't been picked up yet when you left. I nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "You checked the trash." "I did," he confirmed, his voice barely audible. "Dug through every bag in the garage. And there they were, all 4 prescription bottles, still half full." Now he turned to me, his eyes haunted. They were wrapped in a kitchen towel, buried under coffee grounds, like she'd tried to hide them. The confirmation of what I already knew brought little satisfaction, only sadness for my son's pain. "I'm sorry, Michael. Why are you apologizing?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "I'm the one who didn't believe you, who accused you of being confused when you were telling the truth all along." "Because no father wants to see his child hurt," I said simply. "And I know this must be devastating for you." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I confronted her. Last night. She denied it at first, then tried to justify it. Said you were becoming a burden, that your recovery was taking too long, that we needed our lives back." He shook his head in disbelief. When I pressed her about the danger, about what could have happened if you'd missed doses of your heart medication, she just shrugged, like it didn't matter. The casual cruelty of that gesture didn't surprise me, but it clearly had shocked Michael to his core. "Then she started talking about your house," he continued, wiping at his eyes, "about how you're obviously declining and we should think about selling it, about how the money could help us upgrade to a bigger place." His voice broke. "She had it all planned out, Dad. Your life, your death, your assets, all just items on her checklist." I reached over, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Michael, listen to me. This isn't your fault. You couldn't have known." "I should have," he insisted, guilt etched into every line of his face. "There were signs, things she said when you weren't around, the way she'd rolled her eyes whenever you needed help. I just I didn't want to see it. Love can be the most effective blinder, I said gently. We all miss things when we're too close to them. Michael nodded, drawing a ragged breath. I asked her to leave. Last night. Told her I wanted a divorce. Though I expected the confrontation would lead to serious consequences, the finality of this step surprised me. That's a significant decision. It was the only one I could make, he said firmly. She could have killed you, Dad. Maybe not directly, not all at once, but by denying you medication you need to live? That's attempted murder in slow motion. I couldn't argue with his assessment, harsh as it was. What did she say when you asked her to leave? Michael laughed bitterly. She refused at first, said the house was as much hers as mine. Then she tried a different approach, crying, apologizing, claiming she was just stressed about caring for you. His expression hardened. When that didn't work, she got angry, started threatening me with what would happen in a divorce, how her father's lawyers would destroy me. And did that work? I asked, though I already knew the answer from the resolve in his eyes. No, he said simply. I slept in the guest room. This morning when I left for work, she was packing. Said she'd be gone by tonight, staying with her sister until we worked things out. I nodded, relieved that the immediate crisis seemed to be diffusing. Have you spoken with an attorney yet? First thing this morning, Michael confirmed. They're drawing up papers. But Dad, that's not why I wanted to meet. Oh? I wanted to apologize, he said, turning to face me fully, for not believing you, for letting her isolate you, manipulate you, threaten your health. I'm so sorry. The genuine remorse in his voice moved me deeply. Michael, you have nothing to apologize for. You were deceived by someone who was very skilled at deception. Still, he insisted, I should have trusted you, should have paid attention. Well, I said, squeezing his shoulder, you're paying attention now. That's what matters. We sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the river flow past, each lost in our own thoughts. I also wanted to ask, Michael finally said, if you'd reconsider coming back. Not to the house with Margaret, obviously that's not happening, but maybe to my place once she's gone. I could help with your recovery, make up for lost time. The offer touched me, but I shook my head gently. I appreciate that, son. More than you know, but I think it's best if I stick with the original plan. Finish recovering at Frank's, then return to my own home with some support in place. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded in understanding. Because you need your independence. Partly that, I acknowledged, but also because you need space to heal from this too. Divorcing Margaret, rebuilding your life, that's going to take all your energy. You don't need to be caring for your old man on top of it all. Michael started to protest, but I held up a hand to stop him. It doesn't mean we can't see each other regularly. Sunday dinners, fishing trips, visits whenever you want. But we'll both be better off with a little healthy distance right now. He considered this, then nodded slowly. You're probably right, as usual. One of the few advantages of getting old, I said with a small smile, occasionally being right. We talked for another hour, making plans for the coming weeks and months. Michael would file for divorce, secure his own finances, and begin the process of disentangling his life from Margaret's. I would continue my recovery at Frank's, finalize the modifications to my house, and prepare to return home within the month. As we walked back toward the parking lot together, Michael's pace matching my slower, cane-assisted gait, he asked the question I'd been expecting since he revealed finding the medications. Dad, is there anything else I should know? Anything else Margaret did that I'm not aware of? I hesitated, considering whether to reveal the recording, the legal documents, all the preparations I'd made to protect myself from further exploitation. In the end, I opted for partial truth. I did update my will and other legal documents, I admitted. Nothing that affects you directly. You're still my primary heir,
but I did make some changes to protect myself." Michael nodded, unsurprised. "That's smart. I would have done the same in your position." He paused, then added, "Margaret mentioned something about that. She was upset." "I imagine she was," I said dryly. "The changes make it much harder for anyone to access my assets without my explicit consent." "Good," Michael said firmly. "That's exactly as it should be." We reached the parking lot where Frank waited in his car, trying and failing to look casual about keeping watch. Michael spotted him and waved. "I should go. Frank's probably worn a hole in his seat worrying." Michael smiled, then embraced me tightly. "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry for everything that happened." "I love you too, son," I replied, returning the hug. "And remember, none of this was your fault." As we separated, Michael held my gaze, his expression serious. "One more thing. Whatever you need going forward, modifications to your house, medical equipment, anything at all, I want to help. Not to control, just to support, on your terms." The offer, and the careful wording that showed he understood the difference between help and control, warmed my heart. I'd like that very much. Frank was full of questions as we drove away, and I filled him in on the conversation, Michael's discovery of the medications, his confrontation with Margaret, and the impending divorce. "Well, I'll be damned," Frank muttered when I finished. "I didn't think the boy had it in him." "He's stronger than he looks," I said, defending my son. "Always has been." "Takes after his father that way," Frank observed with a sidelong glance. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of changes. Michael filed for divorce as promised. Margaret, realizing her plans had collapsed, fought viciously through her attorneys, but found little leverage. The prenuptial agreement Michael had insisted on, at my urging years ago, protected most of his assets. My recovery continued to progress. By month's end, I was walking with only occasional use of the cane, and the modifications to my house were complete. Grab bars installed in the bathroom, a stair lift for the stairs, entryway ramps where needed. Frank helped me move back in, and Michael spent an entire weekend setting up a new security system, complete with cameras and emergency call buttons in every room. On the night before I was to spend my first night back in my own home, Samuel Winters called with unexpected news. "Thomas," he said after the usual pleasantries, "I wanted to let you know that Margaret Reynolds came to my office today." I straightened in my chair, instantly alert. What did she want? "Ostensibly to discuss Michael's divorce proceedings," he said, with a note of amusement in his voice. "In reality, I think she was fishing for information about your legal arrangements."
"Did you tell her anything?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Of course not," Samuel assured me. "Client confidentiality is sacred. But she did make some interesting comments I thought you should be aware of. Such as, she suggested that you might be confused about certain financial matters, that you had made promises to Michael, specifically regarding your house, that you might have forgotten. She intimated that you had, at one point, agreed to sign over the property to them." I snorted in disbelief. "That's absurd. I never suggested any such thing." "I know," Samuel said calmly, "and I made it clear that, in my professional assessment, you were entirely competent when you updated your documents. But her visit confirms what we suspected. She hasn't given up entirely." "No," I agreed. "People like Margaret rarely do." "Just be vigilant," Samuel advised, "and perhaps consider showing Michael the recording at some point. It might help insulate him from further manipulation." After hanging up, I relayed the conversation to Frank, who had been reading in the adjacent armchair. "She's desperate," Frank observed, "grasping at straws." "Dangerous, though," I noted. "Desperate people often are." Frank's expression darkened. "All the more reason I'm glad you've got that security system now." The next day, I returned home for the first time in nearly 8 months. The familiar rooms welcomed me like old friends, though now enhanced with the modifications that would make independent living safer. Michael and Frank helped settle me in, stocking the refrigerator and pantry, making sure I understood all the new security features, double-checking that my medications were organized and accessible. That evening, after they had both left, Frank extracting a promise that I'd call immediately if I needed anything, I sat in my favorite chair by the living room window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Eleanor's photograph smiled at me from the side table, her eyes crinkling at the corners just as they had in life. "You should have seen it, Ellie," I murmured to her image. "Our son stood up for what was right, and I found strength I didn't know I still had." The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that had once been the backdrop to our life together. Now they were the soundtrack to my new beginning. Older, certainly, but perhaps more wise and resilient than I had been before. 3 days later, Michael joined me for dinner, bringing takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant. As we ate, he updated me on the divorce proceedings, progressing, though contentious, his work, a welcome distraction, and his search for a new place to live, considering a condo closer to my neighborhood. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with cups of coffee, I made a decision. Rising slowly, I went to my desk and retrieved a small digital recorder from the drawer. "There's something I think you should hear," I said, returning to my seat. "I didn't share it earlier because I wasn't sure you were ready, but now I think it might help give you closure." Michael looked at the device questioningly. "What is it?" "A recording," I explained, "of Margaret, the day I left your house. It will clarify her intentions." He hesitated, then nodded. "Play it." I pressed the button, and Margaret's cold voice filled the room. "You won't win, you know. Even if you leave now, Michael will still listen to me. And when your health declines further, which it will, who do you think will be making decisions about your care, about your house, about everything you own?" My own voice, steady despite the circumstances. "You're assuming a lot, Margaret." Her chilling response. "I'm not assuming anything. I know exactly how this plays out. I've seen it before. My mother went through the same thing with my grandfather. The stubborn old man thought he could maintain his independence too. You know where he ended up? In a state facility with nothing to his name, all because he couldn't accept help when it was offered." I stopped the recording, watching Michael's face. He had gone pale, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. "She planned it all," he whispered. "Every detail." "Yes," I confirmed gently. "She did." "Why didn't you show me this before, when we first met for lunch? Would you have believed it? Or would you have thought I somehow fabricated it, as part of my confusion?" He was silent for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're right. I wouldn't have been ready to hear it. That's why I waited," I explained.
And why I'm sharing it now. Not to hurt you further, but to help you understand the full scope of what happened, and to give you armor against any future attempts at manipulation. Michael nodded slowly, processing. "May I have a copy? For my attorney?" "Of course," I said, handing him the device. "Keep this one. I have another." We talked late into the evening, Michael asking questions about the other preparations I'd made, the legal documents, the security measures, the support systems I'd put in place. I answered everything honestly, relieved to have no more secrets between us. As he prepared to leave, Michael embraced me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For fighting back, for not letting her win." "I'm proud of you too," I replied, meaning it deeply. "For having the courage to face a difficult truth and for doing the right thing even when it hurt." In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Michael's divorce was finalized, Margaret receiving far less than she'd hoped for in the settlement. He moved into a condo just 10 minutes from my house and became a regular presence in my life again. Sunday dinners, weekend projects around the house, occasional fishing trips with Frank and me when weather permitted. The security system proved unnecessary. Margaret made no attempts to contact me directly, though Michael occasionally reported manipulative messages or calls from her that he promptly ignored. Eventually, those too dwindled as she realized her leverage was gone. 1 year to the day, after I'd watched Margaret discard my medication, I hosted a small dinner party. Michael was there, of course, along with Frank, Samuel Winters and his wife, and a few other friends who had supported me through the ordeal. We ate well, laughed often, and raised glasses in a toast not to survival, but to thriving despite adversity. Later, as the evening wound down and my guests prepared to leave, Michael lingered, helping me clear the last of the dishes. "You know what I realized today?" he said, loading the dishwasher with practiced ease. "What's that?" "A year ago, I thought we were losing you, not just physically, but your spirit, your independence, everything that makes you who you are." He closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. "Instead, we got you back, stronger than ever." I smiled, touched by his observation. "Not just back, renewed, I think. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us of our own strength." "Well, I'm grateful," Michael said simply, "for your strength, your wisdom, and most of all, for your forgiveness." As he embraced me goodbye, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey had been unexpected and painful, but the destination, this moment of genuine connection with my son, this reclaiming of my autonomy, made every difficult step worthwhile. Margaret had thrown away my medicine, thinking it would weaken me. Instead, it had forced me to discover reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. She had tried to erase me, to reduce me to an inconvenient obstacle in her path. Instead, she had inadvertently helped me redefine myself, not as a burden or a victim, but as a man capable of standing firm against exploitation, of protecting what was rightfully his, of inspiring his own son to do the same. That night, as I prepared for bed in the quiet comfort of my own home, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at me was lined with age, certainly, but also illuminated with the quiet confidence of a battle well fought and decisively won. Margaret had underestimated me, assuming that age had diminished my worth and weakened my resolve. Her gravest error wasn't throwing away my medicine. It was failing to recognize that a man who has lived 70 decades has learned a thing or two about survival. Some lessons come at a steep price. But as I settled into bed, secure in the knowledge that my life, my home, and my relationship with my son were now protected by both legal fortifications and renewed bonds of trust, I felt nothing but gratitude for the clarity this crisis had brought. Margaret had sought to diminish me. Instead, she had helped me redefine myself, and in doing so, had lost everything she had schemed to gain.